Okay, everybody, it's 1:30. The inquiry is resumed. Ms. Nevin, would you like to start your cross-examination, please? Oh, where's Mr. Kershaw? He's on his way. Do you want core docs open, or are we going to go to them as you work through?
Whichever you prefer, ma'am. There's not that many of them, so it might actually just be very easy
Just
to
get
go
them
through
open
them.
now.
The proof is obviously the main one.
Yeah, proof and
I will also look at do you want me to call them out now or call it as we go?
Okay. I was just spinning for a bit of time until Mr. Kershaw sat down. So it's up to you. I'm easy.
We might do it as we go along.
Fine.
So
okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chodorowicz.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to just start with just a few questions on your experience. And you might recall, if you were here for Mr. Kershaw's evidence, that Mr. White put a set of questions to him to establish the weight that the inspector could give to his evidence. I'm going to call this the Mr. White witness wish list, and I'm going to put the same questions to you and see where we land. Have you ever worked at a film studio?
No.
Have you ever produced a film?
No.
Have you ever produced an independent film?
No.
Have you ever sought financing for a film?
No.
Have you ever sought financing for an independent film?
No.
Have you ever worked on a film?
No.
Have you ever financed a film?
No.
Have you ever been an angel?
Sorry, I have contributed financing to a film.
Personally?
Yes, personally, yes.
Have you ever been an angel for a film?
Not an angel, no, just a...
And we got
a
the
funder.
Explanation from Mr. White of what that meant.
Correct, yes, yeah.
Have you have done an economics benefit assessment?
I have done economics benefits assessments, yes. Many, yes.
Was yes as well to that one. And the last one is, have you got any planning qualifications?
I have no planning qualifications.
Okay, thank you. And just sticking with your experience then, if we go to paragraph 31 of your proof, you refer to having contributed economic modelling and analysis to interim and summative evaluations of the Stage Space Support and Development Programme.
Yes.
And if I could just turn to the parliamentary inquiry document, please. That's CD 13010. And I'm looking for page 36, please.
Yeah.
It's starting with question 261. Jane Stevenson asks a question, is the Stage Space Support and Development Initiative, I think it runs out at the end of the year, still having a good effect? So just to clarify kind of where we are in time with that, this parliamentary inquiry was in 2024? Took place in 2024.
March of 2024, right? Yeah.
Yes, that's correct. And it runs out at the end of next year. So it will run out at the end of 2025. So we've almost a year to go then on that.
I understand it's funded to the end of the fiscal year, April 2025.
And Jane Stevenson, her question was, well, how effective is that scheme? And we can see the response from Adrian Wotton there. And just to kind of remind ourselves of who Adrian Wotton is, Adrian Wotton is from the BFC.
Just one sec. Could you not come behind me and take photos, please? Thank you.
Adrian Wotton is from the British Film Commission.
Yes.
And we heard from Ms. Neville that a large part of the delegated function they have is looking at studio space. That's quite an important issue for them.
Yes.
And so Adrian Wotton commented then that the Stage Space development funding they received was to help stimulate studio development where we needed the space. And he goes on to talk about the effectiveness of that in the next paragraph. And he says, although we are not now in a process of trying to stimulate any new studio development, and he says because they want to see how that stage space that has been built or is being built will match the demand as it comes through. That was Adrian Wotton's comment on the effectiveness of that scheme there, wasn't it?
That is his comment at that time, yes.
And then he goes on to look at where the focus is now. And he goes on to discuss that now the focus, if we move down to 264 actually in the question. And I'm just looking at, just to help you find that, it's just above question 265. I'm looking at the last paragraph there.
Yes.
And he says, well, there is that ferocious competition out there. There are lots of people who want to eat the UK's lunch. And then he says, we have put ourselves in a fantastically competitive position because of our infrastructure, our tax reliefs, and our talent. But it is in our hands to lose that work. The biggest factor now will not be our tax reliefs or our studio space. It will be whether we have the people to do it. And so really, my point to you on that is you've done quite a good job through your work on that stage space development initiative, and the evidence, all of the evidence goes towards showing that actually it has done its job in ensuring that the studio space meets the demand. That's what that says, isn't it?
It definitely has done the job in protecting the UK's film and TV production market. The SSSD was introduced at a time when, as in some of the other remarks we've seen, the UK was losing projects to other countries because global media companies could not get studio space. And that was that it was introduced in that response, and it was very effective in terms of alleviating that, which was a tremendous threat to the industry. Now we are pivoting again as an industry to the objective of growth, growing our market share, and that's going to require, in my view, quality facilities such as Marlowe Film Studios, and Mr. Wooten he's already submitted a written support for Marlowe Film Studios, which is in evidence.
Yes, and you mentioned there about pivoting the support now to ensure we meet that growth continues. But actually, what Mr. Wooten says, the focus of that pivoting is actually about ensuring that the skills meet the space that's been created. That's what he says, isn't it?
Absolutely, and we discussed this morning in my remarks the importance of promoting skills and training in the industry, and we had evidence last Friday from Ms. Neville, and I went over it again today, that the government is committed and doubling up on its support for skills and training, and Mr. Wooten is reflecting that as well.
Thank you. If we look at paragraph 8 of your proof then, please. You've been instructed to provide your professional assessment of the economic need for Marlowe Film Studios.
Yes.
And you clarify what that means a bit more fully at paragraph 40 of your proof. And that's to provide your expert opinion on the economic need for additional film and TV studio facilities in the UK, and specifically for Marlowe Film Studios.
Correct, yes.
So just to agree a couple of points then, Mr. Chodorowicz, on approach and what that means, I think we can agree, can't we, that this involves looking at the segment of the international film and HGTV market that the UK is currently unable to service due to lack of space. Absolutely. I think that exercise and the instructions you received, I think we can agree that that does involve looking at the segment of the international film and HGTV market that the UK is currently unable to service due to lack of space?
Yes, and my proof has analyzed, researched, and estimated that that segment is worth 55 billion pounds, and we're not able to service that whole segment or a significantly larger share of it than we are right now because of the lack of facilities.
Thank you. We'll come on to that point after, but I'm just looking to agree matters of approach to your evidence now. It also involves your role identifying the additional business that the UK could cater for if it had more Grade A space.
Yes.
And in particular, if it had Marlow Film Studios.
In particular, Marlow Film Studios, yes.
Can we go then, please, to paragraph 9 of your proof? Here you mention the tremendous growth, you say, in the annual levels of film and TV production, and that this was driven in large part by inward investment production. And you specify that this is coming from investors based in the US and other countries. And you include a graph at your figure 1 just to demonstrate that trend that you refer to as a particular acceleration in growth. Can I just clarify a point? Are these nominal figures or are they adjusted for inflation?
These are nominal figures.
Okay, can I just a point on that, ma'am. I just want to look at the inflation situation, and I've handed this to my learned friend. It's just a screenshot of the Bank of England's inflation calculator, just to help us get a sense of inflation. So I'll just hand that up to you and to the witness now. I'm not sure where we are in the ID documents.
Mr. White, any comments? No.
So just on approach, I think we can agree, just as a matter of statistics, can't we, that the purpose of a graph is to be a quick and user-friendly visual representation of an effect.
Often it is. In this case, it's to position the rest of the study. And I think one of the best ways to position it is to just put out what the public statistics are on the industry. And in this case, it's the BFI film and HGTV production statistics as they are published.
Yes, and it should give a viewer an accurate depiction of a trend at a snapshot glance.
Yes, and it certainly does.
And it does look very impressive indeed, the growth rates on this graph. And we can see that if we take 2007, and if we compare that, the 851 figure, 851 million, to the 6.2 billion figure in 2024, and that being a forecast, that shows that there's been in excess of 7 times more expenditure in 24 than there has been in 27. That's what that graph shows, isn't it?
Approximately so, yeah.
Approximately, I think we're talking about 0.2 or so, but approximately. And if we just pick up that Bank of England inflation calculator, please. And I'm looking at the first page of that, we can see that there's been 65.7% of inflation since 2007 to December 24, can't we?
Yes.
And if we just turn over the page, because you do reference, of course, 2013 as the year from which there was particular acceleration. So just pinpointing that time, we can see that the graph says that in that period, 2013 to December 24, that there has been 37.5% inflation.
Yes.
And so because you haven't adjusted this graph for inflation, the graph doesn't show real term growth, it includes inflationary growth.
The numbers are nominal amounts and they include inflation, but it
doesn't show real term growth. Can you just give a yes or a no?
It does not show real term growth, but with or without inflation, it shows tremendous growth in the industry.
If it were to show real term growth, can you agree just on the maths of that the real term value that we would be looking at in 24 is 3748. 3,748,000,000. That's what that would show if we do the maths on that.
I'll have to take the calculator on that.
Okay. Three, 7, 4, 8.
So if we were to put 2024 in 2013 pounds sterling, it would be 4.5 billion pounds.
So we do see growth from this graph, but if we do adjust it for the real term growth, it's not as tremendous as the graph shows it to be.
Going from 1.6 billion in annual film and HGTV production to 4.5 billion in annual film and HGTV production in real amounts, to me is nearly tripling. It's tremendous. I'll take that over any time period.
It's less than on the graph. I think we've agreed.
The real pound amounts would be lower than what is on the graph, but it doesn't change the observation that the industry has grown tremendously, tripling in real terms since 2013, over a decade, tripling in real terms. I'd like my income to triple in real terms over a decade.
Can we turn up then, please, page 34 of your proof? It's paragraph 168. It's actually the graph at figure 7 that I'm interested in.
Okay.
And this is where you compare the top 10 jurisdictions for the production of theatrical release films. And you position LA as number 1 and you position UK as number 2. What I'm interested in is you compare there a city with a country, correct? LA and UK. It's page 34, and that's the hard copy. PDF 41, thank you. In the first two, you compare a city with a country, correct?
I am comparing jurisdictions that have specific policies and incentives for attracting film and TV production. Some of them are states, some of them are provinces, some of them are cities, but they, in analyzing the industry, they would each be considered jurisdictions. They pursue different policies in terms of the degree to which they want to attract or not attract film and TV production.
Yes, because then you go on to compare the states. And just one point of clarification. I mean, you separate out California. Obviously, LA is in California. So I'm just interested in why you've done that. Why is that a separate jurisdiction?
That might be a reference to the rest of California outside Los Angeles.
It might, you're not sure.
I'm not sure at this point, but that's what I suspect. I can't recall.
Yeah, it did draw some questions just in terms of comparing the cities and the countries and states and then California and LA. But I mean, you mentioned that you do that distinction because of policy incentives, but you do agree, don't you, that that is obviously always subject to change. And we've heard in the last few days of incentives, intended incentives to increase share in the US. Oh,
Take a short adjournment while I go and I'll be back in 5 minutes. Laptop suitably kicked, restarted, and hopefully now working. I haven't got any core docs up though, so just give me 1 second till I grab those. So I still need CD 1310 up?
I'd keep it to hand just
Keep
in
it to
case.
hand.
Yeah.
And proof evidence, anything else at the minute?
If you could take up, you got the appellant's proofs of evidence
Yeah,
to
yeah.
hand and all that.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's it
That's
for now,
fine.
ma'am.
Okay.
I think that's it.
And I've just not got the last few answers. So where my notes run to is table 21, comparing a city with a country. I've got the answers to that in terms of
Yes.
different jurisdictions, but then after that I've nothing. It just disappeared. So
Yes.
don't know whether there was a lot.
No, it was just one follow-up question, and Mr. Chodorowicz explained that he's compared the jurisdictions because they all have the sort of their own self-contained incentives and policy objectives with that. And I was just I just put the point to Mr. Chodorowicz that that is of course subject to change, and that we're seeing, you know, a shifting landscape in terms of, even if we're just focusing in the US, in terms of the incentives there and an intention to increase that. And just to put, do you agree with that proposition? We are in that changing landscape.
California is looking to increase its incentive from, it currently has a cap of 330.
Can't jump in quickly. It's really annoying. You've been asked before, yes or no, and then qualify.
Okay.
So just try and do that. It's much easier for my notes. Thank you.
Yes. One of the, I guess, challenges with, you know, building a film and TV production industry around an incentive is that, you know, it can be dialed up and down quite quickly, and you can lose your competitive advantage. And that is one of the reasons why it is important to invest in structural advantages that persist. And those are defined as infrastructure, physical and human. And that's the way to protect one's competitive advantage in the long run.
I want to look at points about forecast with you now, Mr. Chodorowicz, and if we can go to paragraph 61 of your proof, please.
Okay.
And here you say the forecast growth in the global film and television market is expected to be driven by the OTT market, a market itself underpinned by growth in SVOD services, correct?
Yes.
I think you clarified with my learned friend in chief that the OTT market is the most important market that we're looking at in terms of assessing growth at this inquiry.
Yes.
And you say in your proof that this particular market is of particular relevance to the UK's film and TV production sector, as that's what's fueling the growth. That's your evidence.
Yes.
And just to be clear, at paragraph 69, it's that spending on original film and TV content that you say is the key driver, isn't it, for that OTT market?
Absolutely, yes.
And you cite, so just to skip back to paragraph 62 then, you rely on, don't you, Ampere analysis on estimated spend on the production or acquisition of audiovisual content in 2024. That's a source you rely on.
Yes, I do. The Ampere seems to be the go-to place for production statistics. They've got a tight grip on this segment of the market.
Indeed. And can we go to then CD 13024, which discusses an Ampere report?
Okay, yep.
We can see the first line of this report sort of sets the tone for it, and it says that studio-backed streamers are making cutbacks on content spend. And then it says Amazon and Netflix are doubling down on their localized global strategy. And we can see it discusses the trend coinciding with falling commissions from cost-conscious rival streamers. So I just want to look at this study with you, Mr. Chodorowicz, in terms of your evidence on the OTT market driving the growth. So if we can go down in the middle of the first page, we see a graph titled Ampere Analysis. Do you have that?
Yep.
When we kind of separate all the squiggly lines out from each other, what we can see is Netflix increasing quite sharply in Q1 24. Yes?
Yes.
We can see the next sort of increasing line there is Amazon, can't we? If we kind of go to the next,
Next one is
strong
Amazon.
curve underneath. That's, we've got Netflix and Amazon increasing. We have Disney, which is the green one, showing just the bare hint of a slight increase there in Q1 24. Yes.
Yeah.
I know you reference it's para 81 of your proof where you say Disney has started to turn a profit. So that would be since then. Yes.
Yeah. I keep looking at the chart and all I'm seeing is data up to Q1 24. And earlier I remarked how Q1 24 was a weak start to the year in the UK, and I imagine that's reflected in this chart as well. So I think we need to see the rest of 2024 to make a fuller judgment.
We'll have a look at that point in a moment, but just sticking with the lines and what they're showing us, we can also see Paramount, which is the dark blue line. We can see that declining, can't we, from this graph?
Yes, in Q1 24.
Yep, and we can see Comcast and Apple there at the very bottom, not contributing very much.
In Q1 24, yes.
And just to situate this report, so just if you look up at the top, this report is dated July the 9th, 24, correct?
It is, yeah.
So I take your point about this showing Q1 24, but given we're a bit further on, bit over midway through the year here, and this report is summarising this, it would suggest that things hadn't really moved on that much since then, wouldn't it?
I wouldn't, put too much in that July date. I mean, the article, the headline is Netflix, Amazon drive SVOD original orders in Q1, International in Focus. Despite the fact that it being published in July, it's covering Q1. I don't know. We'll find out if it says anything about what's going to happen in Q2. We'll see.
But you haven't presented any evidence, have you, refuting this and saying there's a completely different growth scenario at the moment, have you? Yes.
I have. Yes, I have. But I have submitted evidence to refute this growth scenario. That is my long-term forecast, which is based on analyst forecasts of the long-term fundamentals for the sector, not the quarter-to-quarter changes in commissioning.
But you don't have evidence before this inquiry, do you? You're saying that there has been a huge uptake, like we see there for Amazon and Netflix, for Paramount or Comcast or Apple. You haven't put evidence of that before this inquiry.
I have not put evidence of quarter-to-quarter commissioning patterns, no. But I have investigated the long-term fundamentals of the SVOD and OTT market in terms of revenue growth and how that will translate into content spend growth.
And we'll look at that now, looking what you've said in your proof in terms of the OTT market here. So if we just start then with 62 of your proof, paragraph 62, you do helpfully set out that important distinction there between original content and acquired content, and I know we've seen that earlier. So I take that point has landed there in that difference. Just to clarify, acquired content is not content that requires additional studio space, is it?
That's correct. Yes. Well, Yes, it does not require additional studio space, and it's certainly not the space that we're deliberating here, like Marlowe Film Studios.
And if we look at your table 7 under paragraph 69, the evidence on the OTT growth here that you've put forward in front of the inquiry does look at original versus acquired content. And we can see that Disney is getting more acquired content than it is producing original content, correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And the acquired content, as you said, is not fueling studio space. We can see that's the same for Comcast, can't we?
Yeah, and none of those data points were taken into account in the market analysis that is in this proof.
We can see there's not too much of a difference there with Netflix. It's almost breaking slightly even on its original to acquired content.
Again, the acquired column is not something that is relevant to this analysis, and so we haven't taken into account, and we shouldn't have.
If it's not relevant to the OTT market analysis, why is it in your proof?
Because it's important to have numbers that, you know, represent a whole sometimes, and give the reader an understanding in case they come across a number and they say, well, Disney's spending 36.1 billion, but your report says 16.5. But if we set out detailed breakdown of these figures, it gives the reader a much clearer understanding. It's much more transparent in my view.
And your evidence relies heavily on this OTT market increasing and driving that demand for original productions, doesn't it?
I think it's not so much my evidence. I think it is the demand for stage space in the UK will depend on the growth of the OTT and SVOD market to a large extent. Yes.
I say it's not so much your evidence, but paragraph 69, we've just looked at it. You refer to the spending on original and television content as demanding and generating that demand for studio space. So it is important to your evidence, that point on demand for original content, isn't it?
Sure, if you put it that way, the statistics are important to the analysis. The statistics on original content production, yes, are important to the analysis and the proof, yeah.
So we'll take up then where we left off. On the table then we've got to Warner Brothers, and we can see, yes, there is much more original content spend there than acquired. That's what we can see there. And if we can just hop back, please, to the Ampere report that we were looking at. And if I could ask you to go, please, to the second page of that.
Yes.
Going down to Paramount then, we can see that there's been more on original than acquired. But if we look at the middle, it's about the middle of that page, it says that, again, situating ourselves in July, there was recent news there that Ampere had, Paramount, I just get the reference, Paramount had announced a merger with Skydance Media.
Yes.
And there was a question mark there over what that would mean for original content spend.
Yes.
Due to that merger. So in the middle of the page, ma'am, in the Ampere document, it's a bit. So if we look at risky but rewarding, just to give ourselves a good visual representation, there's a title. If you go up 3 paragraphs from risky and rewarding, it says Paramount is projected to spend 15 billion on content. But then it says, since the release of Ampere's analysis, Paramount announced a merger with Skydance Media. And the report then puts a question mark on what that would mean for changes for original content spends.
Yes, changes, but it doesn't say up or down.
But there is a possibility that that could mean a focus on acquired content with that merger. It's a possibility.
There's Ampere hasn't said it's a downward change. They're leaving it. They haven't specified. So there's there's a variety of possibilities. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know at the moment. And we can see with Amazon then, just to complete our tour of the list, there's not a terribly big difference there either, is there, between original and acquired content?
Not a terrible difference, no.
So just move on then on this point still to paragraph 92 of your proof. You recognise in that paragraph, don't you, that the SVOD services sector is witnessing a phase of consolidation? Yes?
Yes, the SVOD sector has certainly seen consolidation. But now I think we're shifting possibly away from consolidation and more to aggregation as a response to financial pressures, if you will. I mean, first of all, the introduction of more ad-supported revenue has really bolstered the sector. But also, we're starting to see, you're starting to see Apple Plus on the Amazon platform. So you're starting to see SVOD is starting to resemble pay TV. So I think I'm seeing now that the streamers are recognizing that a bit of cooperation, a bit of aggregation, a bit of wholesaling might be the better response than consolidation going forward.
Yes, and what you say is that SVOD services are merging or acquiring smaller rivals, and you say that's in an effort to amass content as well as sports rights. I think we can agree, can't we, that amassing content includes amassing acquired content?
Yes, amassing content includes amassing acquired content. Purchasing smaller rivals, those would be companies that weren't on the list that we saw in the other tables. So, they may not affect the figures that we've seen on the other table.
Okay, so
for original content production.
Amassing acquired content, and we've agreed that's not content that requires studio space.
That's agreed, yes.
And you then say that that merger is happening as well as in an effort to amass or acquire sports rights, correct?
Yes, we've definitely seen the streamers do more on the sports rights front. And to some degree, that's reflected in the acquired column that we saw in the table. In the table we just looked at.
And you do elaborate on that sports point at 93B, where you recognise that broadcasting premium live sport is an increasing area of focus for SVOD services. Yes?
Yes. Sports is becoming an increasing part of streamer services. And I think it's going to also strengthen their financial position and give them the confidence to invest in original content. So I see it as a kind of supporting original content production, not necessarily taking away from what they would spend on original content production.
But just on sports rights and looking at what this means for additional demand for studio space, I think we can agree that unless the people behind Marlow Film Studios have some secret ambition to host and live stream the Olympics from Marlow at the film studio site, that's not going to generate an increase in demand for studio space, is it?
I'm never going to rule out sports programming generating demand.
Could you answer the question and then qualify?
Can you repeat the question?
Yes, I said on sports content. So
There we go. I'm on. Miss Nevin, any response?
Would you like us to do that exercise, ma'am?
Have a look. Yes, please.
Yeah, no problem. We'll do that. Just bear with us. We have it, ma'am.
Thank you. Whereabouts?
So Mr. Kershaw's main proof of evidence, 34B, paragraph 34B. Mr. Kershaw, the title is Genre Diversification. And then if you look down into the third paragraph, it talks about streaming platforms evolving, business models increasingly resembling those of traditional linear TV channels with a great diversity of scheduled and live content, particularly sports.
Sorry, just whereabouts are you? Because I couldn't find 34.
34, paragraph 34B, main proof.
It's there's a summary.
Is it the rebuttal?
3.4, sorry, 3.4, not 34. 3.4 B. Genre diversification. So if you could start to read, Ma'am, I'll just invite you to read the 3 paragraphs under the graph.
Sorry, it's not taking me to 3.4.
It's okay.
There is some evidence on it that's been presented by the Rule 6. Where's your line of questioning going? Are you trying to make a point that that's not going to result in an increased studio space
Exactly.
demand?
Exactly.
Okay.
Do you have
I've
that
got that
point, ma'am?
point, yeah.
I can move on.
Okay, thank you.
So next point on that, paragraph 77, your proof. It's about midway down the paragraph. You confirm English language production drives demand for UK studio space. Yeah.
Yes.
And if we just turn over then in your proof to paragraph 104, you do then recognise here that SVOD services adhere to a global business model rather than a US-centric one, and that has forced them to not only be attuned to global audiences and consumers, but to be more aware and open to global production options, particularly when those options offer cost-saving advantages. So just to simplify that down, when you talk about global production options, what you're talking about is global options for where one will shoot one's film or TV series.
Yes.
And when you talk about options offering cost-saving advantages, I assume you mean in terms of studio space that's less expensive, crew that's less expensive, and that's what you're referring to there, just so we're clear.
Yes, I think it would be largely crew costs. I think there's less sensitivity to studio space costs because it is a small portion of the budget, whereas, labor costs represent, whereas facilities costs are perhaps 5% at most of a budget, let's say, but labor costs can be 40 to 50%. So it's more about labor costs and about how the financial incentives available in a jurisdiction can assist with reducing those labor costs.
I think based on the evidence you've given here, I don't think there's a dispute between us that the SVOD market, the OTT market you refer to, is setting its sights increasingly beyond the English-speaking markets.
Yes.
If we just go back to the Ampere reports that we were looking at earlier, and it's page 2 I'm interested in. It's under the title Risky and Rewarding. And so this paragraph here talks about the production of international originals, shielding the streamers from the impact of the US actors and writers strike. And then it goes on to clarify that now subscribers, particularly outside the US, expect a steady supply of freshly curated localized content. So what that means is, since the strikes, essentially, those platforms have diversified, correct? And they've created a market now that they need to sustain with production on original film and TV production for those markets.
Yes, they have been increasingly engaging in localized content, the commissioning, the production of localized content. I don't think we can lose sight of the importance of the English language markets.
Yeah.
In 2024, Netflix added 40 million subscribers. Just under 10 million of them were in North America, which is largely English speaking. And that doesn't even include the English speaking territories outside of North America, including territories where English may not be the primary language. All to say, I mean, localized content is part of their strategy, but I don't think we can ignore the global attraction of English language high value content.
No, and we're not saying that market is going away. That's not the point I'm putting to you. It's that currently the focus is shifting.
The Netflix and the other SVODs are turning their attention to localized content more than they have in the past. Yes.
Yes, and if we look down that page, it's just the last line before we come to another Ampere graph. I'm not interested in the graph, but just on Netflix, it does indeed say just what you've mentioned about Netflix, singling Netflix out, that Netflix has decreased the number of feature films it's commissioning from the US, and it's turning more to pay one agreements with theatrical studios, and it mentions in the Nordics, Asia Pacific and Sub-Saharan Africa there. Back on the AMP, yeah.
So it's do you want to give me the question again?
Yes, well, just coming on to the questions to say we have the evidence here from this, that focus is shifting to those countries that it mentions here, for example, the Nordics, Asia Pacific, Sub-Saharan Africa.
I don't know whether or not to answer yes or no, but this article is about Q1. This is out. This is describing Netflix's commissioning behavior in 1 quarter of 1 year, and that's what those statements were. Now, it also talks about Netflix has decreased the number of feature films it is commissioning from the US. That's not the only English-speaking country in the world. Instead, turning more often to pay one agreements with theatrical studios on a global basis, and increased international movie orders. So it's less from the US, more from global providers, and more from the Nordics, Asia Pac, and Sub-Saharan. At least that's how I'm reading it based on the punctuation.
And we've had a look together, haven't we, at the health of the various streamer companies when we did that exercise of going through I'll call the squiggly lines on the graph and seeing which ones in that Q1 were increasing and which ones were decreasing.
Yes, we did that, yeah.
Yes, and Netflix and Amazon we saw were the ones doing well. And well, I say Netflix, taking this example, well, they're doing well, aren't they? Because they're diversing into acquired content and non-English language markets, not because they're doubling down and keeping doing what they were doing and just focusing on film and TV production. That's why they're doing well.
Doing very well because they have been quick to incorporate ad-supported platforms, just as Amazon has too. So I think it's a lesson for the other streamers to move quickly and find better price discrimination models to capture more subscribers.
They're doing well, yes, because of smart business decisions on diversifying and consolidating the market and moving away from traditional TV film spend.
I wouldn't say Netflix is moving away from traditional TV. In fact, I'd say Netflix is starting to resemble traditional TV more and more every time I see it.
What about the rest of the SVOD services? We'll be talking about Netflix, but you don't dispute that they're also diversifying, do you?
Well, they are constantly looking at ways of improving their business models, both in terms of their revenue models, how they generate revenue from subscribers and from brands, non-subscriber sources of funding, and they're also changing their content spending patterns. I mean, they are getting into more and more into unscripted genres and more into sports, but again, those are going to strengthen their financial situation, strengthen their business models, and give them the confidence to invest in original content in the years to come, because that has shown original, compelling, scripted content has shown to be the main driver of attracting subscribers and keeping them.
Just to go back then, just to tie all of this together, looking at your propositions, we agreed at the outset of this line of questioning, didn't we, that your evidence is that film and TV production fuels growth in film and TV production in the UK and demand for studio space. We agreed that at the outset, didn't we?
Can you repeat that?
Yes, that we agreed at the outset of your evidence on this point, didn't we, that it's film and TV production, original content there that's fueling the demand in the UK for studio space.
By and large, yes.
If we just look at paragraph 93A of your proof. The line starting with SVOD services, the second line. Then you say investment in live sports, games, and podcasts are moving expenditures away from traditional film and TV production. So there's an inherent contradiction in your evidence, isn't there? And the very thing you say is fueling growth is the thing that you then say markets are moving away from.
They're certainly on a percentage basis. We're seeing a recalibration of what the SVODs are spending on, but as the market grows, even a smaller percentage of a larger base is going to mean more for the production of original film and TV content.
I'll just ask the question again, so I don't think I can answer that specific question. Is that there is an inherent contradiction here, isn't there? We've agreed that you say original content and film and TV production is the thing fueling demand for TV space, studio space in the UK. You've agreed that. But then we've looked at your proof here where you say live sports, games and podcasts are moving expenditures away from traditional film and TV production. And so the very thing you say is fueling the growth is the thing you then go on to say expenditure is moving away from. So I don't see how we can square that circle in your evidence.
In a percent, again, in a percentage terms, there is going to have to be some shift if the SVODs want to get into new genres and more acquired programming. But as they generate more revenues from advertising and gaining subscribers, which we see in the macro level forecasts, they're gonna have more financial resources to invest in original film and TV content going forward, and they will not have to borrow, if you will, from other genres in the short term to get those genres off the ground.
We move on to look at paragraph 11 of your proof then, moving on to a new topic. It's where you talk about the addressable market. And you helpfully define at paragraph 11 what you mean by the addressable market, and you clarify that's the global film and TV production market.
Yes.
And so can we just confirm then that that global addressable market, that encompasses films and TV production in all languages?
In this analysis, as we see, it encompasses in large part, by and large, the spending by those major, what we have come to be known as the Hollywood studios. And in terms of their streaming services, as we just discussed, they are pursuing more localized content, but a lot of the local content, the local film and TV content that has been made is financed through local public service broadcasters, more domestic facing broadcasters. That's been the history up to now, rather than through the streamers.
That wasn't my question at all. It was just in terms of what that definition encompasses. So you clarified that addressable market is the global film and TV production market. So I just want to clarify that when you talk about that global film and TV production market, you're talking about the whole lot. You're talking about film and TV produced in all languages and all budget levels. That definition doesn't distinguish, does it?
When we're at the 247, yes, the 247 billion includes all languages.
I'm asking not for a figure that you've given. I'm asking for your definition of global addressable market. We can go down into the granularity of that afterwards, and we will. But I just need to be clear on what your definition of that is.
The addressable market, yes, includes the spending by those Hollywood studios on all languages that they commission.
And all budget levels.
Yes, all budget levels.
Okay, so we're talking about the entirety of the global film and TV production market. That's what I thought that meant, but I just wanted to clarify. So we've got the addressable market, but of course there is another market definition that's highly relevant to this inquiry. I don't see it referenced in your proof, but Mr. Kershaw defines it. If we can take up his proof of evidence, please. We could go to footnote 4, where that definition is, and I'll just get the page for you for that. Thank you. It's a rebuttal proof. I beg your pardon. I'm in the rebuttal proof, not the proof. Are you there?
Which,
We're in page 8, and it's footnote 4 of Mr. Kershaw's rebuttal proof. We see here that there is this distinction. You're talking about the total addressable market here, which, as we've clarified, represents the overall market opportunity, the whole global film and TV production market. But there's another market, there's a serviceable addressable market, and that's the portion of a total addressable market that a company can realistically target and serve.
no, I don't see the inherent limitation of a Marlowe Film Studios or any film studio servicing another language of production in the UK.
But it's the serviceable available market for the UK and for Marlowe Film Studios that is the most interest to us at this inquiry, isn't it?
Yes, the serviceable available market, it would be important to consider.
Yes, and it's important, isn't it? Because I think we can agree that Marlowe Film Studios is not purporting or has no ambition to take the entirety, the 100% total of the global film and TV production market.
No,
No.
not Marlowe Film Studios, but understanding the size of the market helps us understand what the potential is for the UK and thereby for the pipeline and for Marlowe.
Sure, but we need to understand, don't we, what segment of that overall total addressable market is a potential serviceable market for the UK, and not only that, is a potential serviceable market for Marlowe Film Studios. That's important to this assessment that we're doing, isn't it? Yes. Yes. But because we're in a situation, as Mr. Chodorowicz has agreed, that Marlowe Film Studios doesn't have an ambition to capture the entirety of the global market. What we need to do is not just look at the total addressable market, that global market. We need to break that down. We need to look at what is the serviceable addressable market that the UK can potentially capture. And we need to go further, don't we? We need to see what could then trickle down to Marlowe.
The serviceable market for Marlowe is approximately 400 million pounds of film and TV production annually. That's what it can service. And that represents under 1% of the 55 billion pounds that is spent annually on the type of film and TV production that goes to film and TV studios around the world.
That's a capacity point, though, isn't it? I mean, that's what, if you put enough space, it could potentially service, but doesn't mean that's going to cause it, does it?
But that's an indication. It gives us an indication of what portion of the 55 billion is relevant to Marlowe.
I'll put it another way. If I was to build a 5-star hotel with a capacity of, let's say, 500 people, just because I've built that hotel, it doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to get the 500 people into the hotel, does it?
No, but understanding the revenue generated by that 500 room hotel in comparison to the overall global addressable market can give you or I or anyone a sense of the feasibility of the project. If it was 10% of the addressable global market, then you'd be worried. But if it's under 1%, then you have something that is certainly feasible, in my view.
What I'd have to do is I'd have to look at my total addressable market. So all the people potentially in the running to stay in a hotel. But then I'd need to consider what my specific serviceable market was. Who will my clients be? Where is the need that I can fill? I would need to go down that further step and consider who might come to my hotel, wouldn't I?
And that is, yes, and that is the 55 billion pounds that we have arrived at in our study, is the full potential of the, call it footloose or call it contestable monies that are available from the global media companies that they spend in California, that they spend in the rest of the US, that they spend globally on film and TV production.
Yes, I want to come on to that 55 billion figure now. I think you'll remember in Chief that my learned friend put to you that we've criticised a lack of segmentation of the market share and asked you to expand on that. And you said to my learned friend, you don't accept that criticism, that your research has taken great care to segment the market. And you said that you've taken that great care by looking at the spending on film and HETV production and how much it was worth. And you said that's the 55 billion on global film and HETV content. But that brings us back to that point, doesn't it? All that does is tell us what the total addressable market, the whole market for all languages and all budgets as you accept it. That's all that tells us that figure is.
That, yes, that does tell us that spending on those, on all original content genres across the languages that those companies that are listed in that table are commissioning at this point in time.
And all budget levels. And
at all
the
budget
whole
levels,
world.
yes.
Okay. But what we're interested in here is the UK share of the English language big budget film and HETV market. That's what we're interested here, isn't it?
Well, we have the UK share of the 55 billion. It's you could, if you want to look at the peak year of 7.1 billion, or if you want to look at where 2024 might land, it's about 11 to 12% of the 55 billion, which is spent on a variety of languages, and budget levels and genres, but it gives you a market share for the UK.
But we're interested in the particular unserviced segment of that big budget English language market that the UK isn't serving now, but could with extra studio space. That's what we're interested in. That's why we're all here, isn't it?
And that is the difference between, that's the other 88%.
But looking into that specific market, the inspector will need to have some sort of an idea of what that looks like in production value, won't she? As a matter of approach.
Yes.
Yep. And how much stage space is required to accommodate it.
Yes.
And so we're interested in that serviceable addressable market. And so just looking at what you have done, if we look at paragraph 13, just to break down what you have done. Again, this brings us back to that point. You set out your 55 billion figure, and this is the figure you came back at when you said, don't accept the criticism that we haven't segmented the market. We have, it's 55 billion, but I don't see how that follows when, as you've accepted, that 55 billion is the total market. That's not a segmentation, is it? You've just given the figure of the total market. That figure does not represent a segmentation. You segment from a total market.
We have segmented from the 247 billion that is spent on all film and TV content.
at paragraph 22, it's when you start to look at forecasts. So you set out here that based on your research of the global and UK market, you consider that the global addressable market will grow at an annual rate of 2 to 4%. Correct?
Yes.
And just in terms of your evidence on what the UK can get, that's at 117 of your proof. And this is where you say that the UK, so getting specific now to the UK can compete for upwards of 55 billion to 70 billion in annual global spending on original film and television production. But the UK isn't going to compete for all of that, is it? Because as you've just said, your definition of total addressable market and that 55 billion includes the whole lot, all languages and all budgets. And the UK is not competing for all of that, is it?
It's still competing.
Is it
No,
competing for all of that?
It is competing for the, specifically it would be competing for, first and foremost, the English language portion of that 55 billion. But we don't know how much is English versus non-English. And even still, I still don't think that non-English production is necessarily out of the limits for the UK. And I talk about that in the proof as to why that is.
But the UK is not competing for the totality of that figure we've just looked at, is it?
It wouldn't attain the whole figure, but it's not like saying that the UK is only competing for 15 billion. The 55 billion. Do you want to repeat the question?
Saying your paragraph 117 says that the UK can compete for upwards of 55 billion to 70 billion in annual global spending on original film and television production. And we've agreed that your 55 billion figure is the figure, the total figure for the total addressable market that includes all languages, all budget levels. So my question to you, my point to you is that the UK is not competing for the full amount of that. It's competing and it's interested in a particular segment of that. I think we can agree that.
We can agree that there are segments within that 55 billion that the UK would be more competitive at obtaining, such as English language production.
Exactly. But you've not set that out. You've not gone down to that level of granularity and put a figure on that, have you?
No.
And when you talk about the 2 to 4% of projected growth, again, you're talking about the entirety of the global market, aren't you?
Yes, that growth rate is in relation to the global market.
I think you can agree that not all of that 2 to 4% growth will go to the UK. Some of it will go elsewhere.
Yes, some of it will go elsewhere, but that growth implies, as I said, £7 billion to £15 billion within 5 years. And as I said earlier, that's, at the low end, that's 14 Marlows.
So some of that 2 to 4% will go elsewhere. But some of it, presumably, the English language part of it, could come to the UK, could come to Marlow, correct?
Yes.
And you've not set out, you've not broken that down to that level, have you? You've not said how much of that 2 to 4% could come to the UK and how much could come to Marlow, have you?
Not specifically, not that in that specificity, but we have looked at that. Certainly adding 7 to 15 billion to the global market because of that growth it is a substantial amount that would support the pipeline and would support Marlow if the UK could win some of it.
Indeed, you don't say how much of that 2 to 4% growth includes the big budget English language film and HGTV production market, do you?
There's no segmentation based on budget in the growth forecast. No.
I don't think it was a question about budget as such. I think I was saying you don't say how much of that relates to the English language speaking market. There's the budget point related to that, but you don't say of this 2 to 4%, within that X point percentage is the English language market.
Yes, it's not said in the report.
Okay, so you haven't segmented the serviceable addressable market in that way. And I say that's important because if we don't do that, we can't quantify the additional business that the UK on the appellant's case is missing out on because of lack of studio space. We don't have that. We can't quantify that, can we?
I disagree because I think, I accept that part of the 55 billion is in a variety of budget levels and other languages, but when we're at 11 to 12% and the economic case for Marlow and the economic case for Marlow plus the pipeline only requires us to gain 2.5 to 2.5%. I think that's useful information for making policy decisions. It gives us a good benchmark. It gives us a good anchor for assessing this situation without knowing exactly how much of the 55 billion pounds is English language. Is it 49? Is it 48? I think we can be confident that it's not 16 and it's not 17. And I'm pretty confident it's not even 30. It's a substantial portion of the 55 billion. And the assessment, the 2 percentage points, the 2.5 percentage points, gives us a very reasonable way to assess, as I've said earlier, the policy case for growing the UK production industry through the pipeline in Marlow.
So, sorry, just to interrupt.
No, stop.
So based on your experience, if you were saying it wouldn't be 15, 16, it would potentially be more than 30, what would you say it was? If you just had to put a finger in the air and based on your experience.
I could go as low as 45, but probably not 45 billion, but probably not lower.
Not at all. I think we can agree, can't we, that a big part of the appellant's case is that Marlow Film Studios will allow business that wouldn't otherwise come to the UK to come to the UK.
Yes.
And specifically to Marlow.
Yes.
Again, you haven't quantified at all, based on that lack of segmentation we've gone through, what that looks like, that additionality in terms of production spend, the studio space. You've not gone to that level in your evidence.
No, the evidence does look at how much production spending would be attracted by the pipeline and Marlowe Film Studios. And it's, I mean, as a rough guide, 100,000 square feet of stage space can service, sorry, 1 million square feet of stage space can service £1 billion of spending. Yeah, so we've got that. So we know from, we don't know, we can't know, we don't know what is definitely up for grabs. But just coming back to my remarks earlier and a few minutes ago, we do know that adding 2 percentage points onto 11% is plausible and feasible and not an insurmountable or ridiculous business plan.
But the point you made there about being able to service it with space, it comes back to that point of capacity. Just because you create the capacity means you potentially could, but it doesn't mean you would.
I don't think the independence of, again, and I spoke about this earlier, the independence of supply, demand and supply is as clear cut. As I said earlier, I think supply is a big part of stimulating the demand. If the quality production facilities are available, it will help the UK attract productions that are already considering the UK because of the financial incentives and the quality of the crews.
You said just now that I think you don't know and can't know what's up for grabs. That's what you said just now in terms of that additionality point.
Yes, I just said that, yeah.
But, well, if we look at Miss Evans' proof, I'll give you a moment to take that up, please. ED 8007. Let me know you're there. And I'd like us to look, please, at paragraph 4.9.
Okay, yeah.
And here we see Miss Evans putting a figure on the missed opportunity in the past. And this being as many as 23 blockbusters from 2015 to 2017 that went elsewhere due to lack of studio space. So in this instance, we can agree, can't we, that it was possible to alight on some sort of figure which gave us an indication of the missed opportunity. So it is possible.
And back in that time period, so yes, we can see the data on the missed opportunity. 23 blockbusters were purportedly missed, according to PwC, between 2015 and 2017. Agree. I've seen the report. It's relayed here, and it gives us an indication of what opportunity was lost because we did not have sufficient studio space at that time.
Yes, and so if there is a missed opportunity, it is possible to quantify that, isn't it? It's possible to say the missed opportunity, as it was here, is 23 blockbusters.
Yes, and back then we were concerned about missed opportunities, and now we're focused on growing opportunities.
Yes.
So it's a different framework for assessing it.
And if we just take up the Volterra report, CD2044. It's paragraph 2.14.
I'm just going to need a second to get
Sure.
that one.
Let me know when you're there. 2.14. Are you there?
It's opening. It's opening.
No problem.
Thank goodness. All right. Which para?
2.14.
2 point. Okay. 2.14.
So again, it's touching on a similar point to Miss Evans. Miss Evans puts the 23 blockbuster figure on that. And then we see here in this report, the finite amount of purpose-built studio space in the UK has led to the loss of several major multi-million-dollar feature film and TV productions or projects. And then in the next bullet point, it goes on to say with big budget films and to a varying degree HGTV projects typically require 100,000 square feet of soundstage space. So when you put those two together, it is possible, isn't it, to quantify a missed opportunity, and it's possible to say how much that represents in terms of studio space.
Yes, because you know that, for example, you need 100,000 square feet for a big budget film. So if you're short that stage space in your, if you had that 100,000 square feet, or if you wanted 3 films, if you had 300,000 square feet, you would have attracted those 3 films. I'm following that. That totally follows. Yes.
Mm-hmm. But no one is saying in 2025, are they, that the UK is missing out on blockbuster productions?
We haven't seen evidence of the missing out situation recently. As I said, it is less about missing out now. We've, as Adrian Wooten pointed out, we've addressed that. It's now about growing and positioning for growth going forward in a competitive global marketplace.
A missed opportunities is essentially, that is part of what's up for grabs, isn't it? If something is up for grabs, it's a missed opportunity you don't have, but you could have.
If something is up for grabs and you don't have the infrastructure to bring that to your jurisdiction, then that is a missed opportunity that could have been alleviated by policy decisions taken in the past. Yes.
And you did say earlier that you don't know and you can't know what's up for grabs. But when we look at this exercise we've just done, where it was possible to say we're missing out on 23 blockbusters, this is what that looks like in terms of studio space, it is actually possible to figure out and quantify a missed opportunity and what is up for grabs. We've just seen it.
Yes, but it's not the only way to address that question. The PwC report has addressed it one way. We have addressed it by looking at looking at that spend to stage multiplier and what would be lost by the UK if it didn't have the competitive infrastructure of 1.3 million square feet in the West London cluster plus a Marlow.
Yes, and the figures we looked at from Miss Evans' proofs, as we've agreed, they go back some years now.
Yes, it's a different world, 2015 to 2017.
Yeah. And we've agreed that exercise is possible to do. And I say it hasn't been done for this inquiry because there is no evidence whatsoever that the UK is missing out currently. Otherwise, that would be before this inquiry. Because it's possible to do, as we've seen.
That exercise has not been done because, as we've seen in the evidence, the missing out situation has been alleviated by policy decisions and by business decisions. And now we are, pivoting, if you will, transitioning, looking at how we invest in our economy for growth.
My point on, yes, ma'am. It sort of takes its time, yeah. The one
There we go.
slide are quicker, I think.
I think I've got your point.
Mm.
Where else are you going on it?
Last point of
Okay.
examination. Yep. So, I mean, my point on all of that, Mr. Chodorowicz, is if you cannot tell how much of Marlowe Film Studios' specific target market, that serviceable available market that the UK is missing out on, you cannot tell us why the UK needs the additional 472,000 square feet that developer is proposing.
I'm going to have to answer no. I can tell you that without Marlowe and the pipeline, the UK will miss out. Well, let me go back. If there is no Marlowe, then I can 100% assure you the UK will miss out on 400 million pounds of film and TV production spending annually. That I can 100% assure you. If Marlowe does go ahead, then I believe it will attract 400 million pounds of film and TV production spending, which represents under 1% of the market, whether it's 55 billion pounds globally or 45 billion pounds. It's still under 1%. It doesn't change the decision rubric. It changes specific numbers, but it doesn't change the conclusion.
That 400 million pound figure, that's what Marlowe would have the capacity to potentially fill, correct?
Yes, and we have to recognize that capacity is an element in demand. It is not, supply and demand are not independent in this marketplace. The commissioning studios go to different jurisdictions that offer attractive financial incentives, and then they bring productions there if the capacity is available. And that's, I'm trying to give you the nuts and bolts of why I'm saying that supply can drive demand in some situations. And this is one of the industries where it can do that.
Sure. And it comes back to my hotel point, really. It's just because you create the capacity to potentially fill something. I think we can agree, doesn't mean you definitely will fill it.
I disagree. I don't think it's entirely the same market. We are talking about, that is a consumer-facing market, hotel rooms, by and large, although I'm not an expert in the hotel industry, although I am an expert in screen tourism. But in terms of studio space, it's a wholesale sector. We talked about earlier how the decision makers in the United States bring productions around the world. So they're looking for where they can get quality infrastructure, physical and human, along with a financial assistance that makes it cost effective for them to produce.
In terms of any business model, no matter the model, really. Hotels, film studios, it doesn't really matter. But the point is, just because you create the capacity to potentially fill something, I think we can agree, it doesn't mean you definitely will fill it.
No, but when you're putting that capacity into a global market that is 45 billion or up to 55 billion, but has potentially a lower boundary of 45 billion pounds annually, and you already are one of the top players in that market, you've got to play to your strengths. And that's what this opportunity would present. It would give the UK an opportunity to present. If you're putting capacity out there speculatively, then yes, your capacity doesn't necessarily translate into a fulfillment of that capacity and demand. But this is a different situation. UK is in a strong position. It is looking to win a small share of the global market with this infrastructure.
Thank you, Mr. Chodorowicz. I have no further questions.
Okay.
Okay. Any interested parties objecting would like to ask, and I'm going to say it wrong now, tell me how to say it again, Mr. Chodorowicz. No? Chodorowicz. Yay. Anyone would like to ask Mr. Chodorowicz any questions that are objecting? Okay, thank you. So I've just got a few. Let me just make sure they've not already been answered. So in paragraph 120 of your evidence, you say that a significant share of the market growth will be associated with the expansion of the OTT outside. The UK is well positioned to capture a significant part of this growth. So where's the significant share going if it's outside of North America and Europe? Where else is it going?
It's going to it would be going to the other jurisdictions. We don't know precisely the split, but it would be going to Asia Pacific, Africa, Middle East, South America. Those are the rest of the world that's not covered by North America and Europe. That's fair to say.
Thank you. And this might be a stupid question, but then who knows, because I'm just not going to ask it anyway. So if you've got more streamers, you've got more money. Why would subscribers increasing demand more content? Does that make sense? So you've got more people watching it, but it doesn't mean that there's more slices of the pie to go around, so to speak. There's still the same amount of TV that's being offered and filmed. So what's the correlation between there being more streamers to there being more demand for content?
And subscribers?
Yeah, sorry, more subscribers, yeah.
Yeah, there isn't a direct link, you're right. And that's part of why we haven't relied on subscriber forecasts. We have leaned on the turnover, the revenue forecasts to guide our forecast of content spending and not any subscriber forecasts.
Okay, understood. It's just there was a lot about subscribers increasing as well as the other.
Yes, there was a lot of scene setting.
Right.
I think.
Okay, so it's more scene setting.
Yeah.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Mr. White, over to you.
After the re-examination, can we go back to Mr. Bird's question, please? When we ask you questions on the, on the microphone on.
And I will turn mine on.
You do remember take you back to this morning and you were asked questions about the 7 clusters.
Yes, the 7 clusters, yeah.
7 clusters, the 7 samurai, 7 clusters. Let me ask you this. You accepted that there were 7 clusters. In your view, and we'll come on to your qualifications and experience in a moment, but can I have your view, please, in the light of Mr. Bird's questions? Are their attraction importance the same? Do all 7 clusters, in your view, operate in the same way or not?
No, the 7 clusters are not identical. They don't operate in the same way. They have different offerings. As I said earlier, they offer different varying levels of physical infrastructure and human infrastructure, which makes them more or less attractive for different types of film and TV production. So for example, some clusters are more focused on high-end TV at certain budget levels. Others might focus on location filming production because they don't have the physical infrastructure, so they more location shooting with a bit of indoor filming. Some of the clusters might offer more, might be a better offer for more cost sensitive or price sensitive producers because they can offer additional incentives beyond the audiovisual expenditure credit. That's the way they offer different things to different producers.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yep.
I did have the wired one last week, but it got given to the witness instead. Just so I'm clear, so is that to do with I think it might be Mr. Davis' evidence about the fact that there's predominantly grade A studios in what's called the West London cluster, what you guys are referring to as the WLC, whereas other studios around the UK don't have that grade A space. Is that?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now, do you remember, please, you had a period of cross-examination about demand and need from Mr. Bird. Do you recall that? Could I ask you to take up Mr. Fannon's proof, please? And could I ask you to go to what LSH say about this demand position? And it is, I don't know what, have you got a copy of that? I want to go to the LSH work.
Oh, you want to go to?
The
You want to go to LSH or?
LSH, which is Appendix 1 of Mr. Fannon.
Okay, I'm gonna need a CD.
CD 9.1. Tell me when, I want you to go to page 2, please.
I'm gonna need a minute just to bring it up.
Is this the December, the original one?
24. No,
No,
not the original.
sorry, not the original.
The update.
The update. So that's CD 902,
902.
not 01.
CD9. Oh, okay. It's just loading. Okay.
And hopefully you've got the distinctive Lambert Smith Hampton cover.
Yes.
And if you go beyond the contents page, you then got a page headed introduction and then section 2 demand.
Yes.
I just want to, we see there's various things about the past, the summary table from 2015 to 24. Then over the page, could I go to the 3rd paragraph on page 3 of the text, please? And it should be a paragraph starting despite the uncertainty.
Yes.
Despite the uncertainty, we are optimistic about the prospects of a recovery in 2025, with the anecdotal feedback from most studios reporting strong bookings well in advance. We are also very positive about the prospects for the UK to increase their share of global production spend. Now, you've had various questions from both Mr. Bird and Miss Nevin about this increase in global production spend. Now, I want to ask you, to what extent do you take the view that your remarks about increasing the UK's share of global production spend are corroborated or contradicted, corroborated, not collaborated, corroborated or contradicted by the LSH evidence to this inquiry, please?
And the LSH is corroborating my position on the UK's prospects for gaining market share going forward.
Have you seen any evidence from a consultancy before this inquiry that takes a different view to your and LSH's position on the increase in share of the global market, please?
I didn't, yes, I didn't see any, I don't recall seeing any discussion of gaining market share in the Rule 6 parties need evidence.
No, remember the question, consultancy. Have you seen any evidence from a consultancy that contradicts the view that you put in your evidence to this inquiry?
Not from a consultancy. I have not seen evidence in that regard.
Next point, do you remember Mr. Bird asked you in relation to the West London cluster, he took you to the BFI's apportionment of expenditure on their skills programme. Do you recall that? The budget, effectively, the point put was that the BFI spend money on a geographical area that includes Hertfordshire and Essex.
Yes, I recall that, yeah.
I just want your view. Do you take the view that it is a proper piece, a proper piece of evidence or not, or an indicator, sorry, a proper indicator of the existence of the Western cluster or not, whether the BFI are geographically spreading where they spend their money on skills for the training of young? Is that, in your view, an indicator or not of the existence of the West London cluster?
Mr. White, can you just repeat that question, please?
Yes.
It was quite long.
It was. Is the expenditure by the BFI on a skills programme and the area covered in geographical terms an indicator of the existence of the Western cluster or not?
I think the BFI clusters and the Western London cluster coexist. I think I tried to explain this morning how, you know, the Western London cluster is defined by the agglomeration of physical infrastructure and the proximity of human infrastructure, the crews, whereas with the BFI Metro London cluster, as I tried to explain this morning, it just wouldn't be feasible to, I don't think it would be feasible to just split London into the West London and the East London, or however it would to be split from a BFI cluster policy perspective. And that's why the Metro London cluster works for the BFI skills and training clusters, whereas from a economic cluster theory perspective, the Western London cluster meets the definition.
Thank you. Could I now move on to Miss Nevin's questions, please? Could you take up your appendix 7.2, please? This is just going to take a moment in the light of the 6 questions put to you at introduction that my learned friend put to you. Let's just deal with this. You say in your curriculum vitae, your recent clients include the BFI. Is that right?
Yes.
What did the BFI ask you to look at, please?
The BFI asked Nordicity to do research in job creation generated by film and TV production. So how different types of films and TV programs generate different rates of job creation on a per pound basis. So films versus high budget TV programs, HETV versus low budget. The BFI has asked me and Nordicity to assess the economic benefits of the London Film Festival. I think that's all I can. I think.
Fine.
Yeah, I could go on, but
Can you remember? No. Well, let me just ask you, because it's obviously in dispute. Frankly, we're going to have a debate about you in the light of those questions. When did the BFI last instruct you, please, to carry out a piece of work?
The, the BFI last instructed Nordicity, which I am a partner and owner, to carry out a piece of work. The last instruction was received in November of last year, and that project is ongoing.
Thank you. Also, we see the British Film Commission, and we heard from Miss Neville on Friday about the British Film Commission. Again, what work did you do for the British Film Commission, please?
We have done a study of the local economic impact of film and TV clusters in the UK. We have done the interim and summative evaluation of the stage, space, support and development program, as well as designing the evaluation framework for that. We have done a study for the BFC of how film and TV programs that are based in the UK generate economic benefits for countries in the EU and the European Economic Area.
Then we note the next on the list, Warner Brothers Studios, and we see there you've got the first two bullet points. The first is for this Warner Brothers Studios. You did the analysis for economic and social impact of Warner Brothers, a master plan 2022.
Yes.
And what effectively was that a document that supported the planning application, or was it in another context?
No, that supported their planning application.
And did Warner Brothers Leavesden, in terms, did they get approval at local level, or did they have the joy of going to appeal?
They received the approval and they're building right now.
Of course it's joyful. We wouldn't be in a job otherwise, would we?
Fair point. Then can I just ask, in relation to Warner Brothers Discovery, bringing the silver screen to the silver state, I assume silver state is Nevada, is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
By using a process of deduction. And then we also note you also did work Screen Scotland. What was the scope of your work for Screen Scotland?
We have prepared 2 editions of a study of the economic value of this film and TV, the screen sector in Scotland. So everything but video games.
And then we also note, please, Screen Skills. What is Screen Skills?
Screen Skills is the agency in England responsible for film and TV training policy and programs.
Thank you. And then just obviously North East Screen and Sunderland City Council, was that in relationship to the same project which you've identified, the Crown Work Studios, or were they 2 different instructions?
That sounds like the same instruction. But there have been multiple instructions in the Northeast. So
Thank you. Okay. Let's then please go on. Yes, can I just deal with this point about, you were asked various questions on figure 7, page 34. Not a big point, but it's just on page 34, figure 7. Do you remember my learned friend asked you why you distinguished LA from California? And obviously,
I think it's table 21.
Table 21 and figure 7 both have the same fault, in a sense, if it be a fault, that LA is separated from the rest of California. And I just wanted to know the source, Film LA, Scripted Content Study 2023. As it says on the tin, a Film LA engaged or interested in the geographical city of Los Angeles, as opposed to Greater California.
exactly, that's why I wouldn't call it a fault. It's definitely a function of the author of that study. Now, I will add, sure, we could have aggregated and whatever we want, but no matter how you aggregate, it doesn't change the 14% market share in the table. It may change the rankings a bit, it may or may not. If you were to, for example, roll up Los Angeles and California, or even roll up all the American jurisdictions into one, but it will not change the 14%. And that's the number that we are benchmarking, basing ourselves on in terms of how much share of the current market the UK has and could obtain.
Thank you. Now, the last thing I want to ask you in re-examination, please, is about, do you remember you had a series of questions about the OTT, over the top videos, and the issue about the expansion of the non-English speaking markets against the English speaking markets? Do you remember that line of questions?
I'm trying to forget it, but yes, I remember.
Can I just ask you though, you agreed about the expansion with the non-English speaking markets, and I wanted to ask you, do you see a scenario where firstly the non-English speaking markets expand with the English speaking markets, or is it at the expense of the English speaking markets? What do you see in looking into the future, please?
Just repeat that again.
Yes.
Sorry. So
Yes.
you're saying you go, Mr. Wet.
Yeah, no.
I won't put words in your mouth.
There was acceptance in his answers to my learned friend. There was acceptance of the non-English speaking markets were growing.
Yeah.
But I was therefore in that scenario of growth in the non-English speaking markets, is that at the expense or in addition to the English speaking markets growing?
Going back to those Netflix subscriber statistics for 2024, and just North America accounting for 25% of the increase in 2020, or nearly 25% of the increase in 2024, leads me to believe that English and non-English can continue to grow in the streaming market. And not only that, but also the remarks I made earlier about the introduction of ad-supported models and pricing tiers suggest that there's still untapped demographics in the English-speaking markets. There's still untapped wallets in the English-speaking markets. People in the English-speaking markets are going to move away from what we would call pay TV, what they would call cable, moving away from traditional broadcast, what we call PSB, what they call the American networks, moving their spending to streamers, which may sound to some people, well, it's zero sum. You're moving the money from here to there, but it's not, because there they weren't spending in a globalized way. Here, that is the streamers have not only a globalized audience strategy, but a globalized film and TV production strategy as well.
Thank you. Actually, I have one more. Sorry, this is, I promise, the final. Could you go to page 20 of your evidence and table 16, please?
Okay.
Now, you're an economist by background, aren't you?
By training, and I like to think by practicing as well.
All right. Well, reassure us that economists know what they're doing in terms of maths. Could you tell me on table 16, we see the global content spend in billion in 2015 was 124. Do you see that?
Yes. 124 billion pounds.
And we see the UK's percentage, well, not percentage, amount was 1.52. Do you see that?
Yes, I see that.
We see in 2023 a global content spend of 204, and we see the UK a figure of 3.74 billion.
Yes.
Now, has over the period of those 9 years, has the UK percentage of the addressable market increased or decreased?
It would have had to increase I won't calculate because the growth rate is higher for the UK, so it would have increased.
So looking into the future, your view about the growth of the market that the UK can take, is that consistent with what we know about the past or inconsistent? Has the history shown an increase in Britain's slice of the pie, so to speak, or decrease?
My position and outlook that the UK can capture further market share is directly, well, it's partly very much influenced partly by the historical record, which we see in this table, and also by the competitive advantage that we see in looking at the characteristics of the UK market in the here and today.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mum. That's my re-examination.
Thank you. You've also got a few bits in your evidence that are links. Could we do the same as we did for Mrs. Neville, please? Whoever did that,
Yeah.
thank you. I've got it. So
It's under, I think it's been done. Yeah,
it's been, oh,
yeah, we'll
super.
have that sent over soon.
Yeah, it's just that links can change. They're quite tricky to
Yeah,
rely on as
we-
evidence.
Yeah, the PDFs have been packaged.
Thank you. Okay, suitable point to adjourn. If we come back, it's quite a lot of people here, isn't there? Do you want to take 15, 20 minutes? Anybody?
We're going to, as can we have 20? We've got an hour with Mr. Davis.
Oh, right,
Which
yeah.
would be
Well, we'll come back at 4 then.
Yeah.
Is that okay with everybody? And then we've just got examination in chief and then pause overnight. Sorry, Mr. Davis, you will have a quiet evening.
That's what I'm planning. I'm planning to do this.
Okay, we'll come back at 4 p.m. We're adjourned until then. Thank you.